Today we're going to be making the zipper tape holders. So this is what it looks like when it's all done. This one's not sanded. It's one of my first ones, so it's very rustic. It will hold up to 10 yards for me. If I do 10 yards, it does come out on the edges, so keep that in mind. If you don't like that, you're going to need to make this wider. Okay, so these are two that I finished, so that you can see. They stand up nicely next to each other so that I can slide them onto a shelf. Things you're going to need. I had my husband help me cut this plywood down. We cut it and sanded it. It is cut to 4 inches by 8.5 inches. You're going to need 2 for each one of your holders. I had 13 that came out of the sheet that I used. It was a pre-cut sheet so that it was easy to maneuver, and I was able to get 13 out of there, plus a couple extras that are skinnier. So this is only 3.5 by 8.5. You're going to need a 1-inch dowel rod cut down. So you're going to need 2 of these pieces for each one of these. Keep that in mind when you're cutting. I sanded these. You obviously don't have to, but that's an option. You're going to need to cut them to 1.5 inches each. You're going to need 2. Okay? I have a quilting ruler, but you can use a tape measure if that's what you have handy. So what you're going to do with this is you're going to be able to measure really well 2.5 inches in and 2.5 inches up directly in the center. For me, if I use this, I can lay it down 2 inches in and then be able to line it up correctly as I fumble. Take my Sharpie and mark a dot. So that's 2.5, and then we go 2.5 up. And now I have my dots in my wood, okay? So this is what I prefer to use. Obviously, if you're going to use this, you're going to want a pencil so you can erase if you don't want markings on it. And you're going to go 2 inches in, mark that, and then 2.5 inches down and mark that, and that's where you would be able to find that a little bit better. So, I have an extra scrap piece of wood down. So if you're wondering what that is, that's what that is for me. You're going to need glue. I prefer to make sure that these don't shift later on to use a little bit of glue. These are 1-inch paneling nails. They have a ridge to them, so when they go in, I don't know if you can see that, but when they go in, they'll kind of get in there really good. And you're going to, of course, need a hammer, okay? If you have any issues with whatever kind of wood that you're working with splitting, do a pilot hole. You're just going to use, of course I can't find it, a really little drill bit. That's all you're going to need. And you would just drill a hole into your plywood. I'm not going to do that today. What I am going to do is I'm going to take my little bitty brad nails, or paneling nails, whichever one you want to call them. Just go through enough that you have a little bit on this side. That will help you line up these later on. If you are like my husband and have to have everything perfect, I would recommend taking your dowels. I have it set in my one there. Obviously this isn't perfect, but you can kind of get the idea of what I'm going for here. So you could do better than me, but you're going to line it up so that you know roughly where your center is, okay? I'm not going to do that with all these. I'd be here forever. And it doesn't have to be exact because you're never going to see the placement of these. You just want them in the middle to hold and grip your zipper tape. I just did that so that I can get a good idea of where my holes are. I think I'm going to do it a little bit deeper on that one and that one. So now, set one piece aside because you're going to work with one of these. And just put a little bit of glue. You don't want too much because otherwise it's going to go over the edges. If you get a little too much, share. Sharing is caring, right? So just share that glue. Line your center up on these, and if you have the little bit sticking out, it will hold that nicely for you while you line this one up. Put my fingers there so they don't fall. And then there's my piece. So this is the first half. So now we were going to go ahead and do the second half. So put a little bit of glue on the tops of your dowels. If you're like me and overzealous, then you can share. Just use a spare dowel. We'll just use that one later. If you lay it down flat and then come together, lining up your edges and squish, excuse me, making sure your bottom is flat and your sides are flat, you should be good to be able to go ahead and hammer your top. Now if it doesn't line up the first time, just remove it and then reposition it, and that way you have it sitting nicely. There you go. This is not flat. This has been hammered so many times it's not even funny. So now you have one. There you go. We're going to do another one really quickly so you can kind of see how fast it goes without me talking. And there you have it. So I have 4 of them done here. This was my first one done earlier, so I can show you. I have, excuse me as I pull this up, I have my rose gold here. It's probably 3 yards, I think. So I just hold my finger in place while I wrap the first round. I've still got my fingers in there. And I keep on going. Now it's 1.5 for that dowel, so you have plenty of space for your zipper tape. If you're making thicker, if you have thicker zipper tape or like a number 3, you can make your dowels smaller. You just want to make sure that the width of your zipper tape is the width of your dowel so that everything works really well in conjunction. And then after I wrap everything, I don't have one handy, but I take a needle and I just set it in there. And that way it holds my zipper tape. So these are 3 that I pulled out and have over there. But as you can see, they hold it nicely. They usually sit up on the shelf like this. These are my rough draft ones. These are my good, this was my good one here, so you can see how much nicer and cleaner it is. But if you have a color scheme going, like I see a lot of people with like teal and white craft rooms, if you want to do something really pretty, you can paint these white or you can paint them teal and have everything matchy-matchy. You can cover them with resin and make them really, really fancy. I don't have time for that, but hopefully these are a great little fun thing for you and help you get organized. They'll sit perfectly on a shelf, and you can even stack them if you have a thin piece of plywood or something in between them to make shelves, and you can make them stack.